Welcome to our latest Influencers in Hospitality interview, a video Q&A where we ask the influential leaders in our industry to share the strategies and insights that have made them so successful.
Welcome to our latest Influencers in Hospitality interview. I am Roger Allen, and this is a video Q&A where I ask the influential leaders in our industry to share insights and reflective wisdom that is part of their success traits. I have the great pleasure of welcoming Dr. Achim Schmitt, who is a full professor of strategic management and a dean of the graduate school at EHL Hospitality Business School. Achim, welcome to Influencers in Hospitality. It's wonderful to see you. How are you?
Very well. Thank you for having me. Excited to be with you, Roger.
Thank you. Thank you for giving up your valuable time. Now, you are one of the industry's key thought leaders, and I think particularly when it comes to influencing the future generations of hospitality leaders. So, first of all, again, I thank you for taking time out to join me. But as an influencer living through the crisis upon a crisis, as the IMF refers to it, and we're deep in that, having come out of the other side of the pandemic, we've got the conflict going on. Has living through this experience changed your approach to work? And if so, what has it taught you?
So I had a little smile on my face when you called me influencer. Allow me to just say, I don't feel at all like an influencer. I think I'm very fortunate to have a position at an educational institution, and through that, actually being in touch with bright young minds that are exchanging with me, and this is just a fantastic job. Couldn't have another job. But coming back to your question, I think what the pandemic has taught me is that I think it has reinforced my focus on individuals, on human beings. I think when the pandemic hit and we were all forced to go into lockdown, being in touch, I never actually valued so much the human interaction by itself, to have a physical conversation, to witness body language and certain types of expression. And that whole pandemic refocused maybe my ideas about, and my focus on human beings, and to listen more to them. And it also brings a lot about thinking about the individuals as how do they feel, the empathy that I have for them. And all this, it got sharpened throughout the pandemic. And this is a little bit where I thought this focus away from pure business conversations, and maybe to ask, as you did in the beginning of this interview, how are you? Are you okay? And to connect. I think this is something that I took on after the pandemic very strongly, and I try to live it every day.
It's interesting. It's almost as if you have to be starved of the human interaction to miss it and appreciate the value of it.
Yes, fully agree. And we always thought in the beginning, if I just add on this, we always thought digitalization helps us a lot. And there we also encountered the limitations to this in this context, and I said, look, that was a good learning, you miss it, and there are limitations. What can you digitalize in the end of the day?
It's interesting. You made reference to, me asking, how are you? It's interesting when I'm asked that question now, I actually honestly give an honest sense of how I feel, rather than masking it with everything's wonderful, everything's great, I'm having the most fantastic day. So I try and sprinkle reality into how is my day going. It also helps to test the empathy from the other side then.
Fully aligned.
As an industry, what should we stop or start doing
Yeah, I think I gotta continue my line of thought here. I think the value of a individual choosing our industry needs to maybe repositioned. And even in the post-pandemic world, we realize how hard it is to get good people, and that a service job is not just an easy job that is for the ones that cannot do anything else. It is real value that they bring to the table, and the value that they bring for the guest experience as well to the table. And in that regard, I think we should stop undervaluing the job and maybe elevate these jobs and the job perception that we have of service employees in the industry. And we should encourage our workforce. I think service employees are probably the ones that are most empathic when they are really good, that they are listening to their clients or their customers, and they are adaptable to find solutions for them and to make them feel comfortable. And I think this is something that we realize now, even in other industries, that value of this, and having individuals that live that every day, we should just recognize it, reinforce it, and work with them to make them feel comfortable in living exactly this empathy in their job environment. So pushing them maybe less under stress, making sure that they have an attractive work environment where they can express themselves. All this helps us also then to increase the job attractivity. And I think everybody knows, listening to this chat or looking into this video, we have a problem in industry attractiveness, but probably how we deal with our individuals will tell us whether or not we are attractive or not in the future.
You spoke then about values. How much have you seen? I mean, you've seen the next generation come through the education system. How much of the young person's values have changed from previous, previous years that you've seen? I mean, we read, all the literature on, the various generations, how are they changing, but how does it play out from your perspective in education, in those values changing, how much has changed?
I think there is a new trend that I personally observe. I'll give you here my personal impressions on this. But the new generation, they are looking much more for, I know it's a word that we use very often, but they look much more on purpose, what they are doing and what they will do in the future. And that is something that they need to see an interest, an intrinsic motivation of what they will do in the future. And if they don't see that this is purposeful, this is something where they add value, they ask those questions all of a sudden, and they ask, like, what can you do? What's your purpose? Do I align with this purpose? Is this aligned with my values? And these personal values that they project into also their future profession is probably something where I would say, how did this whole career perspective change from 15, 20 years ago? And this is something that comes across very strongly, and that if you don't have if you want to be attractive as an employer in the future, you need to have an answer to these younger generations to say, like, look, what do you stand for? How do you treat your employees? What about diversity? What about social injustice? All these different aspects come to play, and we are asked constantly about how we even bring this into our curriculum.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I'm interested to see now whether or not there's a continuation with that theme in your answer to the next question. In the coming years, where do you foresee change or the change in hotel guest experience?
Okay, let me break here the theme and then come back to the theme. So, from a business perspective, I think if we assume a more competitive market environment, I think market segmentation, as well as a differentiated offer by certain market players will determine success or failure in this industry. And hence, in the coming years, when it comes to guest experiences, I think there will be probably less standardization, what we had before, but more individualization and more differentiation in the offers. So slowdown offers, yoga retreats, wellness, well-being, everything around new F&B concepts, more. I mean, we had those trends before. I'm not saying something new here, but I think the expectation of the client and the customers, they will probably in the future be much more demanding, because we also now know even more the value of traveling, because we have experienced a non-travel period. And once you now go for a 2-week vacation or a short weekend, you want that this is actually worth of your time and it fits to what you want. So in that respect, I think the future hotel guest experience will be much more individualized and diverse in the variations of how you can maybe create a lasting guest experience. And now coming back a little bit to the theme, a key role and a key resource in making these guest experience unique probably is the way how the industry ingrains the individuals and the humans working for the guests into this experiential offer and in this service offer that they are trying to implement. And hence, I think you can say now digitalization and artificial intelligence play a role. Yes, maybe we learn more about what these individuals and what each customer wants, but in the end, it comes always back to the individual that needs to implement it and needs to understand it and adapt it. And in that regard, I think if you want to be successful in the future about the guest experience, you need to give also the room and the space and the context for your employees that they can make lasting, individualized guest experiences.
You touched on there the individualization of the experience and that being more important moving forward. But I guess I'm not challenging that. I'm just challenging the status quo, because over the last, I think the last 2 years, we've seen this escalation of personalization, experiential. Do you think that there's maybe too much talk from a marketing perspective and not enough, delivery in action and application of that personalization? I mean, you spoke about AI, and I totally agree. But, that AI has got to be translated into, application so that the guest actually feels that their experience has been personalized.
Okay, I don't want to create here a crystal ball or say that that the industry didn't try to, or that there's a general very light commitment to the individualization. I'm not able to judge that, but what I know that there are a lot of people out there trying to do something different and trying to be create more individualized offers. But what I think is that what is the main distinction towards the past and why I think this will be in the future more important is just the pain points that they have as an industry. So right now, coming out of the post-COVID situation, you have labor shortage. You are faced with a geopolitical environment that is not very bright. Plus, you are probably having used all your cash reserves to come somehow through this pandemic. And now the question is, how do you get and play a critical role on the market? And in that regard, just doing the same as before might give you a nice occupancy rate, but I'm not sure if in a very competitive market environment that this brings you the differentiating element and brings you the revenues as well as the ADR that you probably expect. So somehow you need to do something different to make up for the losses that you have. And if the pain points usually in industries increases, the industry moves quicker towards trying out new things. So that's why I'm rather optimistic that it gets better from whichever pre-industry level you would like to determine.
I love that answer. What I will say, the heat's off now. No more pressure on industry forecasting here and challenging questions. It becomes more personal. What is the best piece of advice you have ever received?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of advice, and I would probably go immediately back to my parents. But in that regard, maybe let's keep it in the business world.
Parents is good. Parents is good. I mean, it's not necessarily business per se.
But I mean, they're similar. It's like the parents that care about others. But I mean, my PhD supervisor always said, like, share and distribute your knowledge. And this was always something that's stuck with me, because information sometimes is used as a power tool, and having information advantages can lead to power tools in companies. But it is always somehow the person that shares knowledge. Knowledge is one of those resources that when you share it, it doesn't get half. You actually increase always knowledge by sharing. And somehow this sharing and caring application, I always said, like, look, if I know something, or if somebody shares his or her knowledge with me, I always learn something, and I could always reflect on it and bring it back, and then it helped also the other one. So I always saw this something as a mutual commitment, and I always loved to work with people that are having a similar mindset. And in that regard, I think, like, the advice, sharing your knowledge, and don't close it up, and don't make sure that you use it as an information advantage for your own good. That was actually a good advice that I try to live up. And I need to remind me at times, because sometimes you're just caught up, and it takes time to share also knowledge, and it takes time to make sure that others understand also what you have learned or not. So, but I'm an educator, so I think if I don't share my knowledge, then I would be in the wrong industry.
You'd be failing very quickly. Coming to actually one of my favorite questions in influencers in hospitality, and that is, what do you think is true that many people might disagree with?
That you need to be egoistic in business. And probably we all want not to have that as a truth. But given that, I mean, I've mentioned before, competitive advantage, all our business models are linked to having somebody winning the cake and the other one having a less big cake or losing the cake. So in that regard, hierarchies, careers are often not based on how well you work with others, even if we all wish that they would be like this. But it's often like how well and how good you are in making a difference towards others and being maybe better than others. And in that regard, I think it's a sad truth, and hopefully in the future we can change it. But I think probably if you ask most of our leaders in the world, they will not tell you that they have been very egoistic to get those jobs, you know. And I think this is somehow sad, but that is probably something that most people might disagree with, but it's the truth.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Do you think the younger generation today, actually, that has actually been worsened by a sense of how accessible, how easy opportunities may seem, and there is an under calculation of how, you know, of being realistic, so how long things may take to succeed, or, you know, obtaining the desired job? Do you think there's an influence in society there?
Yeah, I think if you ask the younger generation, they look for different career paths, and hence I think they are not valuing so much this concept to make it or break it, or to make it to the top one day. I think they would love to be much more less formal and less hierarchical. So there's a clear tendency, I would say, in what I observe, that this is the case. Mm-hmm. The problem is the world that they are hitting at the moment is not at that mindset yet. And often you find them this in entrepreneurial startups or new ventures, that they have these mindsets, and it's all very easy, and this is actually nice. But once they start really going into the traditional established corporate world, they unfortunately hit the ugly truth, if I may say. And then these values and the egoism might take over. And I'm not saying that they are not individuals that are conscious of this and they are working on this, but it is somehow the established line of thought.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. What is the most unusual thing you've had to do to make it work?
That was from my previous career, and I think you probably won't be so surprised, because I think I told you that already. But once in my previous career, I was a bankruptcy consultant, and we tried to save a company out of the situation of going into insolvency. And in that regard, we needed to make sure that we have an international collaboration for, I don't go now too much into details, but for a business deal. And you know how sometimes this is when you are under pressure and under a survival threat, that people sometimes take a long time. They want contracts, and this delay in making this deal actually pushes you further towards the edge, because you don't get the revenues. And it was once very surprising that in a business trip we shook hands, just based on a handshake. We made a deal, and the paperwork came then 2-3 weeks later, but the deal was already done, and the money was flowing, and that was actually nice to see that this is still possible. I mean, it was a contract in the past. If you go 100-150 years back, there was a handshake. A handshake was counting something, and I was just fascinated to see that this was almost 20 years ago, but this still exists, that people are saying, like, look, give me your word, give me a handshake, and we make things work. This was just nice to make something work, and it was very unusual at that time, even with someone that is in a dangerous position. I just was very, very flashed about that.
Wow, I was just, as I was listening to that, I was just thinking, I wonder how many bankruptcy consultants today could actually carry off that deal. And
it might not be possible today anymore in a post-COVID world, because I think, like, it comes also with the economical environment.
Sure. Okay, last and final question. If the older and wiser Achim of today could pass on a few wise words to your younger self at the beginning, at the infancy of your career, what would he say?
Gray hair is not so bad. No, I'm just. No, I would tell myself to be a little bit more patient. Don't win the world in a couple of days. Be much more humble, and make sure that you listen to people, and stop having a judger mindset.
It's interesting because all of those qualities I see in you. So, it's almost if you have had a conversation with your younger self at some stage. But no, I see all of those qualities play out, ever since I've known you. So I don't expect there has been a great change.
there has been a lot of bills for coaches that we work on those things constantly. But I think this is something that you never stop learning, and you need to remind yourself always about those aspects. And sometimes I think you're caught away in certain dynamics, even as a young person, where you really want to prove yourself and all this. And I think like this reflection aspect and this patience and this humility is nothing that comes automatically. I think you constantly need yourself to remind yourself on those qualities, because you get caught up in a very fast-paced business world, and then at the end of the day, you always need to prove yourself. You're under pressure, and I think this is just good for everyone. And I would just not say. I think this humility, being a nice person, being a human-centric individual, I love those words, and I subscribe to those concepts. And probably 20 years ago, I haven't so much, but it's if you're the proof that you see this, I'm very thankful for this compliment.
Achim, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you, and I really appreciate the time that you've taken out in joining me on Influencers in Hospitality. Thank you once again.
No, Roger, thanks for having me. I love exchanging with you, and I hope we can soon meet in person again.
Absolutely. Thank you again.
Thank you.